This man was so proud. He built a tiny home with his bare hands and no prior experience. It was going to be his sanctuary for the years to come, and what made him even more proud was that a local newspaper was going to interview him about the build. Local coverage of his hard work was awesome, but when the interview was almost over, something bizarre happened. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. From his earliest childhood days, Mark had been captivated by the world in miniature in the broadest sense of the word. It started with ant farms, graduated to intricate model trains, and further evolved into a fascination for bonsai trees. But now, as a fully grown man, Mark was preparing to undertake the ultimate in small-scale living, a tiny house. His reasons were simple. As an environmental engineer, Mark was aware of the toll the modern world was taking on the planet. His tiny house, he thought, would be the perfect embodiment of his principles. He acquired the necessary materials, sustainably sourced naturally. He purchased land near a small, idyllic lake surrounded by greenery and enough space for a vegetable garden. With his land prepared, he started with the foundation. He erected wooden posts, leveled the ground, and secured his tiny house's base. Mark worked tirelessly, sawing, nailing, and ensuring everything was measured perfectly. Then came the walls, insulation, and windows, the latter of which Mark spent an inordinate amount of time selecting. Every day, he witnessed his tiny house taking shape. After the shell was completed, Mark moved to the interior. He installed a small but efficient kitchen, a compact bathroom with a composting toilet, a fold-down bed that doubled as a workspace, and built-in storage that utilized every nook and cranny. He spent countless hours studying, ensuring that he got it right the first time. Days turned into weeks, then months. Finally, after countless hours of meticulous labor, the tiny house was complete. It was more than just a house. It was a manifestation of his beliefs, his love for the environment, and his desire for a simpler, more meaningful life. The tiny house was everything he had imagined, compact yet comfortable, minimal yet filled with character. The day was slowly surrendering to the night, and the first stars began to punctuate the sky. So it was time for a final glance from the outside, and then to go to bed for the first time in his finished home. Mark's first night in his tiny home was a testament to his thoughtful design and diligent work. It was comfortable, snug, and had everything he needed within arm's reach. The dawn light creeping in through his triple-glazed windows gently nudged him awake. He arose from his bed that seamlessly transitioned back into a workspace. Despite the early hour, he felt rejuvenated. Just as Mark was finishing up, there was a knock on the door. It was the reporter from the local newspaper, punctual to the minute. She had a contagious enthusiasm about her, her eyes wide and curious as she stepped into Mark's tiny home. She documented every detail and asked pointed questions about Mark's design choices and motivations. Despite the home size, the interviewer took her time, immersing herself in every nook and cranny. She admired the tiny kitchen, the folding bed, silent workspace, and the compact bathroom. He spoke with passion and conviction, his words painting a vivid picture of a man who found purpose and satisfaction in a life less cluttered. Just as the interview was coming to an end, something strange happened. Mark couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the atmosphere shifted. There was a subtle tension in the air, a slight change in the way the wind caressed the trees. Something was different. Something was off. Still, the strange feeling kept lingering. During the interview, the woman from the newspaper kept watching out his window, and at one time she even said she saw something move, but that must have been a mirage because Mark was the only one occupying the house. He watched as she left, her excitement palpable as she carried a potentially riveting story back with her. But as Mark turned back to his tiny house, he couldn't shake off the odd feeling that had settled around him. The day had started perfectly, but now it was filled with confusion. The strange happening during the interview had left him with an uneasy feeling. He sighed, shaking off the feeling and walking back into his home. He knew it was ridiculous. He was the sole inhabitant of this home. Yet the reporter's words echoed in his mind. He meticulously went through the entire house. He checked every corner, every cupboard, every drawer. He sighed again, berating himself for his irrational fear. But as he stood in the silence of his home, he felt it again, that strange feeling of not being alone. He spent a restless night, his dreams filled with strange noises and lurking shadows. Morning found him bleary-eyed and tense. He got up from his bed, his sleep-deprived mind still on high alert. He prepared his breakfast mechanically, his mind running 1,000,000 miles a minute. His peace of mind seemed to have evaporated overnight, replaced with doubt and uncertainty. Deciding that he needed to put an end to his paranoia, he began searching his tiny home once again. Every corner, every nook, every hidden space, nothing. He sighed, berating himself for his fear. He reminded himself of the countless days he had spent building this house. The hours seemed to stretch and seemed to last forever as the fear became a constant companion. His tiny home now seemed almost eerie in its silence. He considered calling a friend, inviting them over to dispel his fear, but he quickly dismissed the idea, knowing how ridiculous he would sound. He thought about leaving for a few days, staying in a hotel or a friend's house, but he quickly dismissed that idea too, not wanting to give in to his irrational fear. Mark tried to determine where the sound had come from. He listened closely and realized it was from the tiny space under his tiny house, the only place he hadn't meticulously cleaned. The tiny house was on a mobile trailer, and there was a small gap between the house and the bottom of the trailer. But what could be down there? Slowly, Mark slipped out of bed, trying not to make a sound. He had his trusty baseball bat at the ready, both a comfort and a stark reminder of the situation's reality. With every step, the sense of dread in his gut seemed to deepen. He opened the hatch slowly. He was taken aback, but when his eyes adjusted, he realized it was a teenager. The boy looked up, his eyes wide with terror as they met Mark's. It was the neighbor's boy. Mark had seen him kicking a football around in the field next to the grounds where he had built his home. The boy was petrified, but he crawled out from under the house. He promised to explain his circumstances with a trembling voice. The boy confessed that he had run away from home following a heated argument with his parents. He said to his parents that he wasn't coming back and that he wanted to teach them a lesson. Then one night, he saw the crawl space in the trailer was open and thought it would be a good shelter. He just crawled in with his sleeping bag. He was careful not to disturb anything and would climb through the window to brush his teeth in Mark's sink during the day. Suddenly, Mark realized what the interviewer had seen. He felt a pang of sympathy for the boy. His tiny home was hosting a scared, homeless teenager. Mark said that this couldn't continue, but he also made him a promise. "You can always come over if you need a place to crash or if you just want to hang out, but we are going to solve this situation with your parents." Together, they walked over to the boy's parents' home. It was awkward and tense, but Mark's presence and calming words helped alleviate the situation. The boy apologized and made amends while his parents thanked Mark for his help. As he entered his tiny house, Mark couldn't help but laugh at the whole situation. The eerie silence was replaced with a feeling of calm and serenity. That night, Mark slept peacefully. He was no longer alone. The home was filled with fresh memories, even if they were strange ones. The boy's story had given his home a new meaning, a deeper purpose. As the dawn broke, Mark woke up to a peaceful morning. He knew that he had not only built a tiny house, but he also built a sanctuary for himself and others.